Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to Mary vs. the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And Dennis Ling.
And cool, you're bringing your A game. This is the year I finally watched some James Bond.
Yay.
Because I did not grow up with James Bond at all. Which is funny because my mom liked Sean Connery. I saw 2 of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. I couldn't care less about those movies. I'm sorry.
You liked
I
them?
liked Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Casino Royale was good.
It was fun.
I was, I guess, okay with Skyfall, but it seems a bit weird to try to make James Bond into a person.
Skyfall felt like the new Doctor Who.
Yeah.
You know, like the whole we gotta give him feelings and
I don't want that.
backstory. And,
No.
Yeah.
I don't want, look, the British don't have feelings. I've been there. I'm part British. Trust me, we don't. So I didn't, I wasn't terribly enthused by what I saw. But I did see Goldfinger.
Yeah.
Goldfinger is great.
Yeah.
Totally, what a blast. So I thought, I never saw any of the Roger Moore James Bonds.
Which is what I grew up with.
Which is,
I
yes.
grew up with Moonraker, and there's actually 3 80s movies with him.
Yeah.
So there's the one we're watching tonight, which is Octopussy.
Yep.
For Your Eyes Only. A title I only remember because of the Mad Magazine version, For Your Eyes Oldie. For Your Eye Bags Oldie.
That's
it's
terrible. That's
It was
not quality.
Not one of their best.
No. God,
Not like the
come on.
Oddfather
Oh, God. And what's the third?
of You Do a Kill. I don't remember anything about the movie, but I do remember it. The song was by Duran Duran. And I think John Taylor, one of the Taylor guys, was a huge 007 fan. And so it was like his lifelong dream.
Or to have a James Bond song. Huh?
Yeah.
Shirley Bassey singing Goldfinger is great.
It's great. That's probably the best.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is.
Followed by To Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die.
No, Live and Let Die. Totally great song. Absolutely.
Pretty racist movie. But
Never saw it. But the song is good.
yeah.
Isn't there like a Carly Simon? Oh, it's like super sexy. Oh, Nobody Does It Better.
I'm really sad that Amy Winehouse didn't get to do one. She would have been great.
Oh, she really would have.
I mean, Adele, she did okay. Skyfall's okay, but
It's fine. It's all right. I mean, I get what they're going for there, but yeah, to not have an Amy Winehouse James Bond is a shame. So I have no idea if there is a theme to Octopussy. I assume there is. I can't imagine what it would what could the lyrical contents be? Okay, let's just unpack the fact that we're watching a movie called Octopussy.
So I think this was the last Ian Fleming book.
Yeah, because he would come up with something that's stupid.
And this is one I actually read.
You read this book?
This was, my parents had it. And I remember they had this tiny little bookshelf, this green bookshelf in this guest room. No one ever touched. And it had Coma, had V.C. Andrews, and it had this.
Oh, God. Wow, all the greats.
Yeah. Oh, and Irma Bombeck.
Of course. I mean, you did grow up in the suburbs.
Yeah. So there was that, and then there was this, and I was so excited. I was like, oh, my God, I have the book of the movie that's coming out. And so, I read it as, a teenager or something. And it's like, oh, I guess that was all right.
Do you remember anything about the book?
Not at all.
Okay,
Nothing.
that's fine.
Blank.
Yeah. I hear...
It was pretty quick. I think it was pretty light reading.
Well, no, I mean, look, he wasn't exactly Tolstoy.
Nah.
I've never read a Fleming novel. I hear as a woman, I might not want to read a Fleming novel. At the same time, as I said, I've seen Goldfinger, and that was a blast.
You saw Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, right?
Yeah, actually, I have seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That's right. That is
You
Ian
wrote that,
Fleming.
yeah.
Oh, where, of course, the girl is named Truly Scrumptious. I mean, the guy just had no subtlety whatsoever.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, right? So him naming a book, Octopussy.
Yeah.
Like, it's bad enough to have like Goldfinger, but like, so yeah, the title of this film. Maybe they had to wait until the 80s to make something with that title. I don't know. I didn't even realize the Roger Moore era went into the 80s. Although, I mean, well into the 80s. I mean, this is like 83, and I think there's another one after this, right? Mm-hmm. So I just associated him with the 70s completely. Now, I mean, it's funny you brought up Doctor Who, and, you know, James Bond is sort of, you know, the dark side to Doctor Who's light side in terms of, you know, British figures.
Yeah.
Very much so. No, I'm dead serious. They are kind of like flip sides of a coin. You know, the Master thinks he's the other side of Doctor Who, and he's not. It's James Bond.
Yeah.
Because they're both at some point working for the British Crown and, you know, upholding this institution that should probably not exist. So Roger Moore is sort of like, he's not the most famous. Like, when you think of James Bond, everybody's doing a Sean Connery impression. Kind of like when you think of Doctor Who, everybody kind of pictures Tom Baker.
See, that's why I see Roger Moore and John Pertwee as the same.
Okay.
For one thing, for me, they were both the first ones I saw of each. So
Sure.
and they both seem too serious or something at first. But then, like, the more you get to know them, you realize they're kind of making fun of the role. They seem the most in on the joke.
That's interesting because the only thing I've ever seen Roger Moore in is, and we did it for the show, Cannonball Run,
Right.
where he's making fun of the fact that he's plays James Bond.
Yeah.
So I'm going into this with, I assume Roger Moore understands how ridiculous being James Bond is.
And by now it's been like 10 years. So
Right. He was James Bond for a long time. Does he have the most movies under his belt?
probably.
So yeah, I'm excited to watch this and just see what have I been missing out on. And also, look, it's a movie called I feel dirty every time I say it. I really do.
What's it called?
It's called Octopussy. All right. If this woman doesn't have 8 vaginas, what are we doing here?
I don't think she does.
Or does she not have 8 feet? I just want to know why it's called this. Why is it called Octopussy if it's other than like just being a dirty joke?
Maybe it's the 8th book? I don't know.
I don't know, man.
Is it the 8th movie? I don't know.
Why give it?
It's not the 8th
It's
movie.
definitely not the 8th movie.
Yeah.
Why give it this name? I can't wait to find out. Why would you call a movie Octopussy? You know, so it's the early 80s.
Yeah.
Or it's not even, like, you're getting into the mid 80s, in fact. So, you know, here is this franchise that you associate with, like, swinging 60s, back when there was actually a British Empire. At the same time, it was always sort of like, hey, we're fighting the Cold War, too. You know, like, that's the weird thing about James Bond, right? Because the Cold War is always, like, the United States versus the Soviet Union. But then there's the UK just kind of saying, hey guys, we're part of this too, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the whole point of James Bond is to kind of, you know, put the UK out there as, hey, we're part of the Cold War, right? We're fighting those Soviet spies. We're not commies. I mean, whatever. I don't know if like he has to deal with Spectre. I don't know if he has to like if he's fighting like the Soviet Union or something because it's the 80s and that's like always the boogeyman at that time. And you know, so I don't know who he's up against.
Do you think he dies in this one?
No, he doesn't die. He's still a thing. Has James Bond ever died?
Yes.
When?
And you only live twice.
What's that?
It's a Sean Connery one. I'm not going to say anything else about it except he dies.
What in the name of God are you talking about? How does he die? He's James Bond. They're still making movies. They're going to recast him. What are you talking about?
He's a Time Lord.
Why have I never seen him regenerate?
You haven't seen that movie.
Listeners, if you understood just how I'm staring at him right now.
You only live twice. We'll see it.
Yeah?
And you'll know.
You want to test that theory? Shall we go watch this movie?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
All I wanted was a sweet distraction
So you said you did not grow up with 007, that you hadn't seen any films, but you sort of did in that Raiders of the Lost Ark and the other Indiana Jones films rip off James Bond beat for beat.
Well, in a sense.
Not rip off, but like it's definitely influenced.
Oh, they're definitely related.
Yeah.
Boy, that's interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because, so there is a through line where you go all the way back to Hitchcock.
Yep.
And go and watch both the 39 Steps. So the 39 Steps was originally a novel published, I want to say like 1914, maybe 1912. Oh yeah, it's really old. And
I've read it. I didn't know it was that old though.
yeah, it's really old. But it's one of the first spy stories. Of course, Hitchcock made a film of it in the 30s. It's one of my favorite movies. Hitchcock kind of kept coming back to the beats of the 39 Steps. Saboteur is a version of that. The best version is North by Northwest.
He reuses scenes constantly, like, suddenly being in a public space and having to pretend to be someone else. Like,
Yeah.
He does that all the time.
Right. And so when you watch like Hitchcock and then you go and watch James Bond, it is so obvious that Bond, the films at least, are lifting from a vocabulary that Hitchcock wrote. Right?
And I was reading somewhere that this really started with From Russia with Love, the second James Bond film.
Okay.
Dr. No was the first one they kind of pushed out, and it's kind of like they were kind of trying to figure their way and like kind of mixing with, what the formula was to follow these books. Mm-hmm. And that they kind of hit their stride with From Russia with Love.
Okay.
And
which I haven't seen.
Yeah.
But I have seen Goldfinger.
Yeah, and Goldfinger's kind of where they perfected it. Yeah. That's their Tom Baker moment.
Okay. Yeah. Going back to your Doctor Who theory.
I can't help but connect James Bond with Doctor Who.
No, it makes sense, actually.
It's like, this kind of avatar of Englishness. Well, Doctor Who is kind of directly descended from Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
It's just another incarnation, kind of.
Is there like any sort of Doctor Who story where he claims to be Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, you know what? I don't know.
I wouldn't be
would
surprised.
Not surprise.
No.
Yeah. It's been all over the place. So,
because I know he's claimed to be Merlin. He's claimed to be like all sorts of things.
Yeah, and Sherlock Holmes is kind of like a Merlin type.
Yeah.
So.
Like it's all fitting an archetype. And so if like James Bond is the dark face of that in a way.
Is James Bond like Lancelot? Sorry, we're getting into our other show.
Yeah, see, there's a reason like this is all coming up at the same time as we are launching a second podcast for the Patreon, which is us looking at our theory in movies. So it's very much on our minds, which is, again, you brought up Indiana Jones. And so the through line, just to jump back to that, is you watch Hitchcock, then you watch James Bond, and then if you're me and you're a kid, you grow up watching Indiana Jones movies. At the time, I didn't know it, but Spielberg was absolutely pulling from both James Bond and Hitchcock, right? Now, everybody knows Spielberg loves Hitchcock and, uses him all the time, right?
Kept trying to meet him, and Hitchcock was like, oh, I don't want to meet with that guy who made the Fish movie.
Oh, man, that's so mean.
I know.
Oh. It's funny because it never occurred to me until you kind of said something that Indiana Jones is a version of James Bond.
Yeah.
Because you have this guy trotting around the globe, going after a MacGuffin. He romances a beautiful woman. Each movie he does.
A new one each one.
Oh, are you going to just let Harrison Ford sit there with his shirt on? No, you're not. I'm sorry. So yes, please let him romance.
Yeah.
Okay? Even if she turns out to be a Nazi. Look, we all have that problematic person in our past.
It's a repeated theme in James Bond films too, where
True.
like the person he's romancing turns out to be an enemy spy, and he's like, easy come, easy go.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't think about it until you had kind of said something, and then all of a sudden I was just like, oh my God, this is Indiana Jones. Although the difference between Indiana Jones and James Bond is interesting.
He doesn't really get to enjoy like the victories,
right,
or something.
Yeah, there's something. I wish I could remember exactly what you'd said.
Well, I kind of wanted to get into it in the other podcast.
I know, but you know what? We're teasing the other podcast a little bit. So, yeah, if you want to hear like our thoughts on, we don't want to talk too much about Indiana Jones because, that's not really the focus of this movie, but there is definitely a through line.
Well, what I was getting at is the difference between an English hero and an American hero.
Right.
Like an American hero, I feel like it's something with the puritanical nature of American heroes in that they're not allowed to enjoy their empire. Yeah.
There's always a sense of guilt.
Whereas the English, they lost their empire, and they're like, well, we did deserve it, though.
But also, they really loved having an empire, man.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like
they had no guilt about having one.
No.
Which is really awful. But it's fascinating how, our kind of cultural figures are all, it's like, why is Star Wars so popular? The whole idea is to overturn the empire, right? Yeah. Our founding myth is we got rid of an empire, a lot like Rome in the Republic. It's we got rid of our king, right? So, but there's always this sense of, you can go after this thing, but you can't entirely enjoy it. Like you can't let yourself give into the pure crapulence of loving an empire, right? Yeah. Because then you just end up being an American fascist. Then you end up doing like MAGA stuff.
I don't know, like Cobra.
Like Cobra. Yes, exactly. You end up making Cobra.
Yeah.
So James Bond, I didn't grow up with those movies, but boy, it's fascinating how the beats feel very familiar.
Yeah.
Having said that, this movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?
No, and I think that's going to be a problem with this podcast in that this movie is unhinged, so we're going to be unhinged.
Oh my God.
There's nothing to latch onto in this film because it goes all over the place.
It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's just briefly lay out what the plot of this movie is before we even talk about it because it's so dumb. A rogue Soviet general thinks that if he sets off a bomb in West Germany or West Berlin at any rate, like West Germany, if he sets off a nuclear bomb there, everyone will say, oh, nukes are bad, mistakes happen, we should disarm. And if they do that, if like France and England and all that give up their nuclear weapons, then the Soviet Union can just march in and take over the rest of Europe. And from there, the world.
And there's like a scene where like all these Soviet generals are sitting in a semicircle, and like the table turns. It's a very like spy.
Oh, it's a perfect James Bond sort of scene.
Yeah,
it's
like
really well done.
Yeah, and a map of Europe opens up, and then like the red wave covers with like these armies of tanks and stuff, or like, columns of tanks.
It's great to look at, but the plan doesn't make any sense, and in fact, it's terrible. Now, to be fair, the response of like the Soviet Council or whatever is, "Dude, you're nuts! What are you talking about? We're not going to do that. That's a horrible idea. We're not going to do that."
I will say the casting of the bad guy was good. I thought he looked like a good unhinged mad general.
Definitely,
and a little wasted because we don't really see him much until the end of the movie after his introduction.
No, and we'll get into like when you actually sit and think about his plan in the context of it's 1983.
Yeah.
Okay. Already there's a move towards like nuclear disarmament, and there has been you had like SALT treaties and everything. Mm-hmm. And it's the 80s. There is a fear of nuclear war that I remember as a small child. Yeah. Like there was this sense that we're going to get killed any day now because somebody's going to make a mistake and set off a bomb. And this movie basically says, yeah, so we can't have a disarmament because then the Soviet when you actually sit down and think about what the thrust of the movie is, it's we should not have nuclear disarmament because that's what the Soviets want, and that's the only thing keeping them from marching in and killing us all or making us all become commies or whatever. Yeah. Like it's like anti-Dr. Strangelove. when you actually sit and think about what the message of this film is, it's horrifying.
One of them. This is pretty much like the framing device of the film.
And the film does almost nothing with it until the very end. Like you forget that that's the whole point of the movie. Because then the rest of the movie is a jewel heist in India, I guess. There's a woman named Octopussy who is a jewel thief. She A, lives in India on a, like, I guess like a lesbian commune on an island in the jungle. I don't know. B, so she's a jewel thief and she owns a circus, which is confusing. Yeah, no, because it does say it's Octopussy's circus, which is very right. Okay, the fact that you don't remember and you've seen this movie before says something, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that she is stealing Russian jewels, I guess, or she's going to receive the Russian jewels. Again, this doesn't make any sense. So like there's no point in it. Like, and then like at one point they have a container filled with jewels on one train and the bomb is on the other, and so they switch the two. Why? I don't like. I'm still trying to figure out what the point of that is. This movie doesn't actually make sense, right?
So,
like there doesn't have to be a thing of jewels. I guess she doesn't know about the bomb.
She has nothing to do with the bomb.
No, she doesn't.
She just is a jewel thief.
Right, but she owns the circus
and
where they.
She's the daughter of a jewel thief who was a British agent or something.
I guess
that's her connection with Bond, because she knows all about Bond.
Right.
And the reason why she knows all about Bond is that he was sent to capture her father, but allowed him to kill himself instead of like getting disgraced or something.
But so why is there a container of jewels on one train and a nuclear bomb on the other? And both trains are connected to Octopussy's circus.
So she was using the circus to steal jewels.
Yes.
To move jewels and stuff. The whole connection to the Russians is that somehow like they are making fake jewels to finance evil.
It just doesn't make any sense. Well, okay, I think whatever the connection is has to do with the Afghan prince.
Yeah.
Which I can't believe we forgot about him.
Well, we didn't. It's just that there's so many things going on. There's so many balls in the air.
Oh my God. There's a lot of balls in the air, but they're all being like thrown against, you know, like in different, it's like when you have like those like super rubber balls and you just like throw them against a wall and you have a whole room full of them just like bouncing off the wall. Like it's not like you're throwing them in the air like you're juggling. It's just chaos. Yeah. This movie doesn't make any sense.
So we're fans of film noir. We're fans of The Thin Man.
Oh,
we're used to things not making sense.
Oh, I'm not saying this makes it a bad film.
But the thing is with those movies is that at least you have like set pieces and like characters that make sense and stuff. This one, it's kind of all over the place.
It's okay to not make a whole lot of sense if you're just getting a vibe. And I guess James Bond has a vibe, but the vibe is being like British and maintaining an empire. So it's kind of like, I don't know if that's a good vibe. I mean, sometimes it works, and sometimes it's like, oh, wow, is this movie more racist than Temple of Doom? I don't know.
Well, yeah. So you can't talk about a Bond film and not talk about the formula it follows. And this template is followed by Dirty Harry, it's followed by Cobra. You know, like there's always an opening scene of like this superhero demonstrating, you know, everything that's cool about them. So Cuba has like this special plane that has a blinking light on the front, which I guess is something, and he has to blow it up. He gets caught. Some hot lady gets him out of it. He goes into a horse trailer that it's a fake horse, and there's actually a tiny plane in there. He escapes, but then they launch a missile, and he guides the missile back to the plane he was supposed to blow up and completes his mission.
Okay, so I'll say a couple things about this opening sequence.
Yeah.
One, the guy playing Fidel Castro is pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Much heavier than famously athletic...
A pitcher.
A pitcher. Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
Okay, who's apparently hanging out with, I guess, Anwar Sadat for some reason.
Why not?
I don't know why, but the other guy hanging out with him looks like Anwar Sadat at like a racetrack.
Yeah.
Like, okay, fine. So that's number one. Number two, you mentioned the horse trailer. This is kind of where the movie was just like, yeah, you know what? This is exactly the movie I want to watch.
Exactly.
Because he is trying to escape the Cubans, and so he drives onto a horse trailer. Because it turns out the horse is fake. Inside the horse trailer, he gets onto this horse trailer. The horse itself is fake, and then all of a sudden, the horse's butt lifts up. and out flies a collapsed plane that the wings come out and he flies off.
Yeah.
It's an absurd, first of all, it's like a Trojan horse situation, which I'm just like, okay, why not? And it's the level of absurdity that like I kind of do expect from a James Bond movie. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is what I want.
No, this is perfect. It's perfect James Bond.
It is. It's a perfect opening. It has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous looking.
Yeah.
It's great. The only problem is Roger Moore, how old is he here?
So he was 55.
Yeah, he looks 55.
Yeah, and he has yet another movie after this.
Oh, God. How?
People were making fun of how old he was in the previous movie from 1981. And here he is. He's got 2 more movies to go.
He's got a real Troy McClure vibe in this one then. You know, like it's just leather.
He was ready to retire. He was like, yeah, I'm too old. Let's give this up. I'll just go do Cannonball Run. So he's ready to retire. And so Eon Films, they're the ones that own James Bond. It's Cubby Broccoli is the guy.
Cubby Broccoli?
That's his nickname.
Cubby Broccoli. Hold on. The guy who owns James Bond is named Cubby Broccoli.
Yes. Albert Broccoli.
Bert Broccoli. Wait. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Bert is
work.
better than Cubby.
Right. So anyway, they're planning on bringing in James Brolin as an American to be James Bond.
No.
Now we've seen a
I
film,
know, but
a test, and he's too laconic. He's just not. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all.
Like he's too kind of tired. There's no zip. There's not that English crispness.
No,
Yeah.
and like he's not funny.
No, he's not funny. Each James Bond is always kind of a reaction to the previous Bond, and
Sure.
I think they were always like, like Roger Moore is a little too silly. Let's go for more realistic or something.
So who came after Moore? Was that
I think that was Timothy Dalton.
okay?
I think.
Now,
Like they wanted to get Pierce Brosnan in, but he couldn't get out of Remington Steele. And so I could see why James Brolin, he's definitely not Roger Moore.
after his escape from Cuba, we get to the opening sequence with like the song "All Time High." Then we get the song.
Then we get the bodies.
Yes.
the lady bodies,
And
which is every movie.
It's standard.
Yeah.
James Bond, and
But this one has lasers.
the thing is, it's so weird to watch this in like 1983. This feels so dated.
Yeah.
Like the whole film feels very dated. If you had told me this movie came out in 73, I would have said, yeah, okay. But it just doesn't feel right. So the opening song is like the big theme for this one is called All Time High.
It sucks.
It's not a good song.
Yeah.
Like Rita Coolidge is a great singer.
Yeah,
Nothing against her, but this song sucks. All I know is the lyrics are by Tim Rice. I don't like Tim Rice.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. This song is terrible.
Although I do like it. It specifically says like here's something you could to waste an hour or two.
That's true. That is pretty funny. Like
Here you
I'll
go.
give him that.
Waste an hour or two of our movie.
This movie is over 2 hours long. This is
and
shockingly
it shouldn't
long.
be that long.
No,
They should have cut it a little bit out.
they could have cut away at this thing. They really could. But then, so we get the song out of the way, and now all of a sudden we're at the circus.
This is actually a great scene. We see a clown running from the circus, and two knife throwers are chasing him.
Twins chasing him through a jungle.
It's a great scene because it involves a clown kicking one of the guys in the crotch with his clown shoes.
Which is
it's really funny looking.
Yeah, it's great. These twins murder a clown, but he makes his way to, I guess, a British consulate
With a knife in his back.
with a knife in his back, at which point he delivers a Fabergé egg.
Yep.
Now we cut to the Soviet Union, and we have, as we told you in the beginning, the plan with the general and all of the other Soviet, leaders going, you're nuts.
Yeah. And then after that scene, he goes to like this underground bunker where some poor schmuck is making fake jewelry. And
Yeah, they're making like fake Fabergé eggs to be sold on like the market at like Sotheby's and whatnot. And
he's like, work harder, my craftsman monkey.
I didn't understand why they were doing that though.
So there's actually two James Bond stories being involved that were in the collection called Octopussy and the Living Daylights. It came out in 1966, I think. I think it was also published. Some of it was published in like Playboy magazine at the time, of course.
I was going to say, where else would James Bond fiction live but Playboy? It is,
Exactly.
yeah.
So one is called Property of a Woman, and the other is called Octopussy. And there's other stories like taken from other James Bond things mushed together. This is all kind of to combat Thunderball. I mean, the other movie that's being made, because they want to show they're using Ian Fleming's source material. Because they're kind of running out. They've made 13 movies by now, or this is I think the 13th movie. There's only I think 13 books. Like they're running out of material, so they're using these two short stories. One is Property of a Woman. This is about the Fabergé egg being sold at Sotheby's. They're trying to figure out who owns this Fabergé egg. They only know it's property of a woman, and the woman shows up, and she's there. Magda, she is there with the Afghan prince, and he ends up bidding against them, and he has an intuition that they're going to pay any price, so he keeps bidding. It's supposed to be £250,000, and he drives it up to £500,000, and he's with this other British guy who's like completely flabbergasted, like, oh, what are you going to do if you win this thing? And you say, well, I would say it's fake, because it turns out he stole the egg and then replaced it with a fake egg. And then the other story is called Octopussy, and this is about an ex-agent who was a war hero, and he was caught murdering someone, and to save face, James Bond lets him commit suicide instead of being arrested. This turns out to be the father of Octopussy, and who taught her how to be a jewel thief or something like that. So these two stories are just kind of mushed in with all the other stories. And then the other one is Octopussy. I don't know where the word Octopussy comes from. I read a synopsis.
I know where it comes from.
No, I mean, I read a synopsis of the story, and I still don't know why is that a word.
I think we can guess.
So in the movie, it's the name of this daughter of some ex-agent. Also the name of this group of jewel thieves made up of the lesbian army.
Yeah, of course. Always.
Yeah.
There's always, because they have the same thing in Goldfinger, if you remember. There's another lesbian army in that too.
Yeah, and why not?
Oh, no, I'm just saying Fleming had a thing.
Yeah. It sounds like when she's talking about it, she's saying that she's reviving some ancient army of lesbians.
Sure.
I don't know.
I guess it's like, oh, we're Amazons or something, but come on, man.
Yeah.
This is just a guy fantasizing.
And she lives on an island where no men are allowed, but men are on it. So
yeah, that's the thing. There's definitely men there.
That rule's broken almost right away.
Right. It doesn't. So I think what ties together the Fabergé eggs and the Soviets and Octopussy herself is this guy, Kamal Khan.
Right.
Who is a deposed prince of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is tying into the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, I guess, except it doesn't make, why would he work with a rogue Soviet agent if his whole thing is he wants to get, I guess, his throne back?
Well, I think he just wants money. He's said you're just a common thief or something, or maybe that's what.
No, see, here's the thing. His entire arc doesn't. There is no arc.
Yeah.
He's just, there he's just doing things. He's just there to be a villain.
Well, he's there to be a villain and to be constantly embarrassed by James Bond.
Yeah.
To
have a bodyguard always there to beat up James Bond.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's the thing. There's three-ish villains, because of course the women are never really villains in these James Bond movies. They always get won over. But so this guy, this Kamal Khan, is the go-between, because he's the one who is, I guess, helping to finance the Soviet general getting his nuclear bomb.
Although we don't really know about the nuclear bomb till the end of the movie, but
we partway through the movie we understand what's going on, don't we?
I don't know.
See, you can't remember either.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, let me just, as an aside, by the way, this Kamal Khan is played by a guy named Louis Jourdan, or Jourdan. He's French. So there's also brown face in this. A little bit. So you've got the Soviet general as like one villain, but then you've got this Afghan prince as the other villain. And he's the one who, I guess, connects the Russian jewels being stolen or fabricated.
Right.
It's a little iffy. Like sometimes the jewels are real and sometimes they're fakes. It depends on where they're being used. Like the Fabergé eggs are fake, some of them. And those are the ones being put on auction for some reason.
Like, I guess he and the Russian guy are stealing jewels from Octopussy.
Are they? No, because he's like hanging out at Octopussy's island.
But I think in the end, that was the plan.
I guess.
I don't know. But she was also supposed to be blown up, so.
You know, look, we're struggling understanding what actually happens in this movie, and you don't have to. No, it doesn't matter, because you get this entire like middle sequence now suddenly set in India. Like I can't even tell you why we go to India, except that like somehow the Kamal Khan is the link that gets us into India, and now we get set up with.
At the auction, that's where Bond switches the egg with a fake one.
Yeah.
And so he goes to India to give them the real egg because they're putting a transmitter in it so he can follow them.
Right, but why does he know to go to India, is what I'm saying.
Because that's where the guy went. Because they're like, oh, so that's the one that we're looking for.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so look, it doesn't matter. Does it matter?
No.
I don't know.
Like so with Bond, like you want to see action pieces and you don't really think about whether it makes sense.
No.
But usually the ending explains everything. It's like, oh, well, we got this and we have a satisfying ending, and this movie does not deliver.
No, it doesn't. And so you end up kind of going, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like here we are in the middle of the episode floundering because we're suddenly like thinking back on the film and we're like, wait, does this link to this? Does this...
Yeah.
Like we haven't even talked about like Magda exiting a room by just tying a part of her dress to a railing and then just rolling down.
That was great.
It was an amazing. She goes like, au revoir. Oh man,
what was that?
I am not French.
Your DNA says otherwise, but
but she just leans back and like goes down like 4 floors, just rolling out of a dress. It's amazing.
Yeah, this was straight up some Cirque du Soleil stuff, man. That was great.
Yeah.
Speaking of the circus,
filmed in like 5 different countries or something. It was like her falling out of the window was like on like a soundstage, and then that stunt was filmed in like India, and it's just really cool.
Can we talk a little bit about India for a second?
Sure.
Oh boy. Okay, so first of all, the establishing shot. Sure, let's just go with the Taj Mahal.
A very, very Hitchcockian thing.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Mm-hmm. I would love to see the Taj Mahal someday.
Though Hitchcock would have like the final fight on the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, we get this kind of establishing that this is India. So they show the Taj Mahal, and then they show a river that I assume is supposed to be the Ganges or something. There's a lot of people in it and whatnot. And we are in... did they ever say that we're in, like, what city? I don't think they do. We just know we're in a city in India.
Yeah.
Like they don't say, well, we're in Mumbai. They never explain. They don't say we're in Calcutta. We're just in India. Yeah. And it's, kind of your comic book Hollywood idea of what India looks like. Mm-hmm. So it's a very crowded, very hot looking city.
There are fire eaters. There are people on beds with nails.
Yeah, this is not good.
Take every like 1930s to 50s cliche, wild India and tigers and
right.
Yeah.
So you've got a guy laying on a bed of nails. That you've got a snake charmer. You've got
crocodiles.
You got guys climbing up rope. I mean,
leeches.
It's like, oh god, it's so cringe.
Every possible one it could use.
Wow, really? We're just gonna throw in every cliche. Okay.
But they do bring in Vijay.
I think Vijay Amritaj.
So he was a tennis player in the 70s. This was his first role. In fact, in order to get him to be allowed to play this, because he wasn't a union actor, Broccoli got him onto Fantasy Island just so he could get like the credentials to be allowed to be in a movie.
Did he have much of a career in acting?
Not really. Like it's just pretty much this, and he was in Star Trek 4 as like an unnamed captain.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta
Starship
go back.
Captain. Yeah.
I gotta go back and rewatch Star Trek 4. It's been a long time.
Yeah. His brother is also his brother was also, I think, a tennis player, and also ended up in Hollywood somehow as like a producer.
Oh, okay. Well, there is a chase scene that has VJ fighting another guy by hitting each other with tennis rackets. You want to watch a fun fight chase scene? James Bond will give it to you.
Yeah.
And this is, it's silly, but it's fun. You know, we brought up Indiana Jones earlier, and this whole the whole India sequence does remind one of Temple of Doom. Unfortunately, you know, like there is a scene where Khan brings him back to I guess his palace there in India, and they serve like stuffed sheep's head.
Yeah.
It's a very gross scene.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm gonna say, look, I eat meat.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not against the handling of, like, I don't have a problem with that part per se. Like, you know, I mean, I once had this very vivid moment when I was cutting apart lamb chops, like the rib cage, and just thinking about what I was actually doing. And it was kind of this really introspective. So like, I don't have a problem with the handling of like animal parts. Like, I'm not vegetarian and whatnot. So. And if you are, no, don't misunderstand me. I don't think it's wrong to be vegetarian. I not at all. But it's like, I don't have a problem with that per se. And I've eaten. I was once in a Czech castle eating a roasted boar, and it was a full pig in front of me, like the face and everything. So like, I know I can pick up a fish and descale it and all that stuff, right? This was gross. The way they filmed this was disgusting because, first of all, like the eyes are like there, and the dude eats an eye. I mean, this is not at all different from 2 years later. You're gonna watch Temple of Doom and see the monkey brains.
Yeah,
this is basically the same scene. So obviously, Spielberg must have been watching that. Well, I'm sure he watched this.
Yeah,
and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna one up them." And
I feel like that Temple of Doom, part of why that it's kind of a lesser film of like the Indiana Jones films is because it's Spielberg. He wanted to do 007 films, and Broccoli said no twice to him in the 70s. The first time it was after Duel, and he's like, nobody knows who you are. The second time was after Jaws. He's like, I can't afford you. And I feel like that Temple of Doom, he was like, I'm just going to make a James Bond film. I'm going to dress him up as James Bond in the first scene. And
right, because that entire opening scene in, Shanghai?
Yeah.
That is totally a James Bond, like, scene. Like, right down to the fact that he's wearing that white dinner jacket thing, man.
Yeah, he gets poisoned, and he has to get the antidote,
Yeah.
and he has to fish it out of her. It doesn't work well because, like, it's kind of going against the character of Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, like, it belongs in a museum, is his moral code.
Yeah.
Which
is by itself kind of a problem, but
of course,
yes.
But James Bond's moral code, and it's said by Octopussy in this, is for Queen and country. He'll do anything. He'll murder people. He'll stab people in the back. But as long as it's for the Queen, he's fine. Because Octopussy tries to hire him as like, oh, I could use a guy of your talents, and if you know what I mean. Sorry, this film has so many double entendres.
Now we're in India and we kind of, I guess know what he's looking. I still don't entirely understand what he's looking for. Basically, he's just there to have a dalliance with Octopussy and try to figure out what the deal with Khan is.
It's hard to tell, their connection with the Afghan prince. Is he just one of the gang, or is he his own thing? I don't know. Like,
I don't want to go beat by beat because we're already driving ourselves insane trying to understand what happens in this movie. I just want to talk about the fact that, let's see.
There's a barge with the lesbian army rowing to them saying like in, out, in, out.
Yeah, it's so...
Oh my God. Which I just keep thinking of that Freaks and Geeks episode with Mama's Got a Squeeze Box.
Right?
That's sex!
Yes, exactly. You just sit there and just go, yeah, this isn't subtle.
No, it's not subtle at all.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of not subtle, at some point James Bond is swinging on a rope and does a Tarzan yell. They do an actual lift from a soundboard of the Tarzan,
I could not believe they just used that sample.
They did.
It was not him doing the yell.
No.
It was just they just took like a 1950s.
That was Johnny Weissmuller. Yeah. I'm telling you. I don't know. Come on.
Like the way you hear the Wilhelm scream now,
yes.
it was just straight ripped off a soundboard.
See, that's the part where the movie actually goes from being kind of winking at the audience to just that's almost, I'm sorry, that is a naked gun gag, and
Yeah.
that's why it goes too far. You know what? Because it's one thing if
and
it's an airplane gag, but that's not an airplane gag. That is a naked gun gag. So finally, we get to Octopussy herself, though. It turns out Magda is not Octopussy. We finally see Octopussy.
Yeah.
This is the only time where somebody in this movie looks like it's 1983.
Right.
Everyone else, this movie looks and feels like it was made in 1967.
Octopussy herself looks like she belongs in Falcon Crest or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I thought. The way that, the way her hair is styled, the way she acts, everything about her says, I should be Joan Collins.
Yeah.
Everything else about this movie just does not feel like the 80s. It is so weird when she comes on screen and all of a sudden it's just feels like contemporary to when this was being made. There's just something about her hair and her mannerisms. Everything else does not feel contemporary. And it's a very weird moment. And it almost took me out of the film because all of a sudden it was being reminded of, that's right, this movie actually came out in 83, not 73.
You know what? I don't think I noticed at all. I think you're more in tune with the difference between 70s and 80s than I am. Because a lot of times what people say are the 80s, to me, it doesn't look like, it looks like later 80s to me. For me, when I think back on the 80s, it looks like the 70s to me.
For one thing, you're kind of hitting on an issue that I think a lot of people don't really understand or think about. The fact that, just because a calendar flips over doesn't mean that the culture has changed enough to differentiate itself.
Yeah.
So that, things that come out in the early 80s, things still look like the 70s. Things that come out in the early 90s still look like the late 80s,
Yeah.
right? And so, I've joked on here about my long 1980s theory, but there's a reason for that, so things just kind of bleed into each other. And unless you have a sharp event that actually makes material changes to a culture, you have that bleed over. So there are times where there are sharp events. So, the 1920s definitely come to an end with the onset of the Great Depression.
Right.
Now, at the time, I don't think people were quite as conscious, but boy, there is a big difference between the 20s and the 30s, right?
Right.
And there is a big difference between the 90s and the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the change in the tone of movies in the 2000s from the 90s, and there is a sharp change.
Yeah.
Where everything just becomes grim, right? So unless you have a big exogenous shock, time kind of bleeds, right? And this movie bleeds.
Yeah.
And so, when Octopussy shows up and she feels like, as you said, somebody from Falcon Crest, it kind of took me out of the movie for a second. Not in a way that I think really matters. It's more because I'm a little obsessed with, thinking about culture and things like that. So I don't know. I just found it really interesting because the rest of this movie does not feel like the 80s. Even the stuff with the Soviets, it doesn't quite feel like the 80s. But so finally he hooks up with Octopussy and, they sleep together because it's James Bond. She has an octopus-shaped bed, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I loved this thing.
Yeah.
I want to roll around on that thing. I don't have sex on it. I just want to roll around on it. It looks it looks pretty great.
It looks like something that you'd find at some Valentine's Day suite in the Poconos.
Yes. That's totally what this looked like.
Like in the next room, there's a champagne glass bath.
Exactly, with a lot of listeria in it.
Yeah.
Or there's that motel on the boulevard. Do you know what I'm talking about? The one up in northeast Philadelphia that has all the theme rooms. Mm-hmm. It totally has that vibe. Yeah. So at this point, Khan's goons come to basically get James Bond because
they kill VJ.
That's right. They kill VJ.
Sad.
Yeah, that sucked. That was a shame. So he's out of the movie. They're there to kill Bond and Octopussy, I guess. And one of his henchmen has essentially a buzzsaw yo-yo, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like that. It's dumb, but I like it. Yeah, but then they escape. And I guess next thing you know, we're at the circus again.
You know what? I'm confused.
And that's fine because we're finally starting to get towards the end of the film. Khan is the one financing the Soviet general by dealing in these stolen jewels. Again, look, don't try to make sense of what happens in this movie. That's not the point.
This is where the train switcheroo happens.
Yeah.
Where she's supposed to be getting jewels that's being transported in this cannon for the circus, and they switch it with another cannon that has a nuclear bomb that will blow up everything in 20 miles.
Yeah. It's really dumb. And so, like, the connection again is that, like, Octopussy's circus, she owns the circus, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Suddenly we're back in Berlin. They show the circus and, all the switching the jewels and the bomb and whatever. And the whole idea is that James Bond has to infiltrate the circus in order to stop the bomb from going off. All right. It's really weird to watch the movie at this point because here's the thing. Like I've said, this movie does not feel like it came out in the 80s. You know what else it doesn't feel like? It doesn't feel like we're going to get Wings of Desire in a couple of years. Because I'm watching this and all I can think about is, hey, it's a circus in Berlin. And all I can picture is one of the most beautiful films ever made.
Also features a circus.
She's a trapeze artist, right?
Yeah.
Or like to whatever extent.
Yeah. Of course, whenever I think of circus in Europe, I always think of Fellini, but yeah.
Well, which is fair. Yeah. But, because it's Berlin, all I can think about is Wings of Desire.
Right.
Which if you have not seen it,
see it.
Please see it. It is amazing.
Stop the podcast now.
Seriously, stop the podcast, go watch Wings of Desire and come back. It's very weird to think that movie came out a couple years after this, really. Because the vibes are so different.
Yeah. But this is where the knife-throwing twins return.
Yes, we get them back
So
because
it's
they're in
them-
on the plot.
Yeah, it's them and the strong guy.
Some of the circus guys are connected to Khan, I guess. Or maybe they're communists. I don't know. It's not very clear what Khan is getting out of the Soviet Union taking over Europe. And it's really funny because the whole idea doesn't actually make sense in the reality of what the 80s were like for the Soviet Union because they were basically bleeding out because of their war in, again, Afghanistan. The Soviet generals are right and like, no, we can't go and take over. We don't have the manpower. Like that's not really the argument they give, but it's true. This is where we finally get kind of the climax of the film.
It should be.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's a whole nother scene after this.
This is where the film just goes on too long. So like the bomb is at the circus. So you have the first circus and then they get on the train and they go over to West Germany. They have another circus because that's what they do.
So he's on the train in the car with the bomb.
Yeah.
With Knife Thrower 2 because he killed Knife Thrower 1.
Right.
And put him in a cannon.
You know how they shoot the human cannonball? Well, they throw him in there.
Then there's a fight on the train, on the top of the train with the strong guy.
Oh my God, how did I forget the fight on the train?
Yeah.
It's actually, that's actually kind of fun to watch.
It's
a good sequence.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Octopussy is there. Like, everyone's there.
Everybody's on this train.
Yeah.
This is, again, you can't not think about Spielberg a few years later doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The other, like, they're both pulling from...
And tons of,
Okay, so they're both pulling from two things. One, there's a film that I've never seen, but I should see, called The Great Train Robbery from the 70s with Sean Connery.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay, and that movie is a remake, an expansion, I don't know, of one of the first narrative films, The Great Train Robbery.
Yeah.
From, I don't know, 1900 or something?
Yeah, the one that ends with Joe Pesci shooting at you.
Well, that's exactly where, yes. If you, again, another film we're going to recommend. Go and watch because it's only like 11 minutes long. Yeah. And it's on YouTube, it's whatever, but it's just The Great Train Robbery, and it's one of the first kind of action films. And it does exactly what the label says. It is a train robbery. Made in the time period when they were making train robberies. Okay, if you've seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, all of the old train footage that they're showing of a train robbery is that movie.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is a film that's been referenced many times. And again, they're probably referencing it here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the train fight, like a lot of it is green screen, I guess. But there are actual stunts happening on this train. But anything that's a close up of Roger Moore is obviously like green screen.
I think rear projection. I don't think they do.
Oh, you're right. It is rear projection. Yeah. It looks even faker, which is fine. I don't care. It's a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
Eventually, like in order to hide on the train, James Bond puts on a gorilla suit.
That's earlier, yeah, but yeah.
Because this movie, again, it's hard to follow. But so, what's up with these guys wearing gorilla suits on trains?
On a train.
This is the same year as Trading Places.
Yeah.
It is the same gag. Thankfully, does not end the same way. But it's a guy in a gorilla suit on a train.
Like, did this happen on Silver Streak? Was this just a thing back then? I don't know. But it feels like, I don't know, maybe just because we've seen it twice, but like... recently. It seems like something that would happen like in a Mad World or something.
Yeah, that is very much the vibe.
Maybe it would be in like a Three Stooges thing or something. It just feels vaudevillian.
It does, exactly. It feels, it's a little too silly. It's a little too silly for a Bond movie.
Well, it was like this movie was criticized for that and him in the clown suit.
That's right, and we haven't even gotten to him in the clown suit yet.
Yeah.
Because we do finally, the train gets to West Germany and they set up another circus, at which point James Bond goes undercover as a clown.
Yeah.
And it's the same clown outfit as the first clown. And
which bothers me.
Yeah, I don't like this.
Don't reuse a gag in the same movie.
Well,
I have no problem with him in a clown suit. I really don't.
I do.
I'm like,
I do.
It's Roger Moore. He's supposed to be sillier than Sean Connery.
Yeah, but there's silly, and then there's being humiliated.
Yeah, I guess.
Like, I feel like this goes a little too far in having him an actual clown.
Well, for me, the scene I keep going back to is Doctor Who, John Pertwee dressed as a cleaning woman. Mm-hmm. Like, it works because it's just one scene and he says not one word. You know, it's like, this is completely out of character, but, you know,
yeah,
it's fun for one scene. And I feel like if this was just one scene and there was no gorilla suit, I would have been fine with it.
Yeah.
But the gorilla suit's a little too far, and the fact that we've already seen another spy dressed up as a clown, drop it. You don't need it to do it again.
Exactly. It's just too much. Speaking of too much.
Yep.
So they've defused the bomb.
Yeah.
And fine. You would think that'd be the end of the movie because
it should have been the end of the movie.
It should have been the end of the movie. They capture the Soviet general and he's going to probably be sent to Siberia.
No, he gets shot, remember?
Oh, that's right.
He dies on the tracks and he says, "But I will be a hero in Soviet Union tomorrow."
Oh, I forgot about that. You're right. And first of all, he won't.
Yeah.
Not just because they stopped the bomb and everything, but
that line was cut in Finland for some reason.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know.
Weird.
Yeah.
I wonder why. And so the movie should end there.
Yes.
But it doesn't.
No.
Because now we have to capture Khan. Now that the bomb hasn't gone off, Khan gets the jewels, and so he goes to run off to his private plane that he's going to escape into the sky.
Also, his man is fighting with Octopussy's army.
Which, by the way, I forgot to bring up the fact that her lesbian army are dressed like Thing 1 and Thing 2 from Cat in the Hat. It's very weird. I mean, they really do look like...
The thing is, like, not all of her hench ladies were dressed that way.
Yeah, but the ones that are,
yeah,
it's really distracting. He kidnaps Octopussy.
Yep.
And puts her on. What is he gonna do with her? I don't want to know. But he kidnaps her and takes off in the airplane, and so James Bond basically is able to get onto the airplane as it's taking off, like hanging on.
He gallops on a horse and jumps on.
And this whole sequence actually does feel like something a little bit out of like a Mission Impossible, maybe. And again, it's just too much. This movie's gone on too long at this point.
I feel like this has probably happened in other Bond films, though.
What, that it goes on too long?
No, I mean, like, this kind of stunt, like jumping on a plane. Like, this is a Bond thing.
He's on the outside of this little Cessna plane, and Khan's henchman is told to get out and fight him on the plane. They're way up in the sky, by the way. This is two men, and it is two stuntmen fighting on a plane in the air. This would be really thrilling if I hadn't already sat through like 2 hours and been like, is this movie over yet? Bond is able to throw the henchman to his death.
Khan tries to land the plane.
Yeah. And
then so Bond jumps in the door, takes Octopussy. They jump off just before the plane goes over a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's Indiana Jones' Last Crusade.
It totally is.
You know, where like she falls off the cliff, but he hangs on and pulls her up. And
it looks exactly like
just magic.
The end of this movie, there's so many beats that Spielberg must have been like, yeah, I can use that.
Yeah.
And it's really weird to watch because I'm thinking to myself, oh, I have seen this movie. I've seen a better version of this movie. A much better version of this movie.
And the thing is, like, not many people remember Octopussy because you just forget it. It's mindless fun, but it doesn't really stick to the brain.
So then we get to the end of the film. Khan's dead.
Yeah.
And the bomb has not gone off, and James Bond has to recuperate, and he decides to recuperate on
The pleasure barge.
the pleasure barge of Octopussy
In, out.
sailing to her little island, and he's all in traction and stuff until she's just like, oh, it's such a shame that like you're all injured and we can't do anything, and then he just like throws off all of his casts and everything, and
The
that's
spirit of England
yeah.
heals him.
I don't know, is that a good movie?
So the reason why it doesn't work, it's missing one thing that Bond films have, and that's Spectre. The reason why it doesn't have Spectre, this is a problem that goes back to 1958 when Ian Fleming's like, I got these hit novels, I got to make them into movies, I want to make more money, I'm bored. And so he finds this guy named Kevin McClory. He's a screenwriter, a producer, and he worked on The African Queen. And he was making a spy film. And he's like, oh, this guy must know how to make spy films. So he and Kevin McClory and like another friend of his, like they kind of workshop this James Bond film called Thunderball. They have it pretty much worked out. Kevin McClory is really into this idea of like an underwater lair or something. He's like, oh yeah, and kind of a lot of the fantastic stuff of the James Bond universe probably partly comes from this guy. During this process, like Kevin McClory's spy film comes out and bombs terribly, and Ian Fleming's like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So he decides to take the script that they had workshopped and types it into a novel, publishes it, because he's been publishing one novel a year since 1951. And McClory is like, wait, that's my ideas, and it's just by Ian Fleming. So he sues him, and there's like this multi-year court case that Kevin McClory wins, and eventually Kevin McClory is now co-author of Thunderball. It's like based on ideas worked on, and he's like actually one of the first names on it. And the thing is, probably most of it is Ian Fleming, but Kevin McClory is now contractually like the owner of Thunderball partly. And Thunderball introduces Spectre, introduces Blofeld, who's like the head of Spectre or something. So when you think of James Bond, it's just like G.I. Joe and Cobra. It's just like Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. with Hydra.
Yeah.
There's always this shadowy organization that's like, yeah, there's bad guys, but then there's these real bad guys.
Where does that come from? Do you know where? You know what? Like, there's got to be something that like Fleming was working off of.
I don't know.
I mean, does it go back to like?
QAnon does it.
Well, that's true.
This was what Pizzagate is.
Yeah, I guess it's like being afraid of Freemasons, and Rosicrucians, and communists, and it's all that kind of. There are shadowy forces. I guess it's. I mean, it's. Hopefully not anti-Semitic, but it all has a certain taint of anti-Semitism.
Right. So Spectre is basically owned by this McClory guy.
So every time they want to use that in a film, they have to pay his estate?
Yeah. Like I'm not quite sure of all the legal issues, but they slowly kind of phased it out. In fact, there's
Well, no, but they brought him back in the Sam Mendes movies.
Well, I think by then maybe he was dead, or who knows. But in the 80s, like they are phasing it out.
Okay.
During the 70s, McClory was trying to do his own Bond film because he owns, he has some rights to it. And there was always this fighting with the Fleming estate and also with Eon Films. But he still owns Thunderball. So in 1983, I guess Sean Connery was like, oh, I think I'll give it another go. So he and Connery make a Never Say Never Again, which is Thunderball. It's just Thunderball. They just remake it.
So the same year as Octopussy is Never Say Never Again.
Yeah, and that has Spectre, has everything, has all this stuff that Eon can't use because it's McClory's.
But is it a James Bond film?
It is.
Uh-huh.
But it's not Eon Films.
Right.
It's McClory.
So it's non-canonical.
I guess.
If there's is there
whatever,
a James Bond canon? Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
But I feel like this movie is lacking because there's no shadowy organization. It's just a bunch of dudes.
Also, I think it's just poorly constructed.
But I feel like that this shadowy organization thing covers a lot of plot holes. Like,
True.
You know, like, oh, this woman, she attacked me. Oh, it turns out she's Spectre. You
Okay.
know, like it's such an easy way to like, oh, this person was actually bad. You know.
You've put a lot of thought into this particular episode. That's interesting to me. Not that you don't not that you don't put an effort in other ones, but you said we watched the movie last night, and
Yeah.
today while I was running errands and stuff, you spent a lot of the day researching Octopussy and James Bond and all this stuff, and I find that really interesting. What does James Bond mean to you?
It's more that he's always been there. Like he's always like. So part of the appeal of James Bond is that James Bond always reflects the films around it. So like like Star Wars is a hit, so they make Moonraker.
Yeah.
Like it's constantly stealing from the films around it. So it's always evolving.
Well, we brought up Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And it definitely like steals from his movies like Saboteur and North by Northwest and stuff like that.
But I think as it goes on, it's even more blatant and just like if something's particularly it wouldn't surprise me if a Rubik's Cube just pops up in the next one, or if there's like a subplot about like, oh, if you had to play video games to win something.
Right.
It's like that blatant and that like shameless.
Do you think this is why all of the Daniel Craig movies are not fun? Because look, I brought this up earlier. Like since the early 2000s, I mentioned this when we watched Cobra, just like how dour movies, especially action movies, are. Like you said, it was it was a reaction to with the Bourne Identity in part, but and you're probably right, but
also I think a reaction to Pierce Brosnan, who's definitely more of a Roger Moore type,
Yeah.
There's no muscle at all. It's just like, straightening your tie and, driving a tank. But,
Well, the 90s were more fun than the aughts, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting that James Bond, those movies kind of reflect like a sort of grimness and malaise that, culture.
But the first movie seemed like a breath of fresh air. Like,
Yeah.
Like it seemed very stale.
Sure.
Pierce Brosnan was getting bored with it. It just felt boring. And then when you see,
Casino Royale.
yeah, when he runs through that wall in that first scene,
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It's like, wow, this is not the Bond we're used to.
Yeah.
Like even Sean Connery wouldn't do something like that. Like this is a bull. This is like a crazy, thug.
So here's an interesting contrast, though. You go back and you watch Goldfinger, where they've got the laser headed for the crotch.
Yeah.
Okay.
You expect me to talk?
Right.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Which is great.
great.
That's so good. But like, there's something kind of like understated in a way. Like it's overly complicated, but understated compared to Casino Royale, where you've got Daniel Craig naked getting hit in the balls with a spiked rope or whatever.
You know what? I think that might be more in the books.
That's probably no. Here's the thing. I'm not talking, but here's the thing. I've never read the books. I don't care about the books. Insofar as I'm talking about the mood that films want to evoke when they're being made.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, it definitely feels different. It's the same sort of we're going to hurt your genitals, but the Casino Royale is made in a world of torture porn.
Yeah.
And it reflects that.
Some actually photographed in the prisons of Abu Ghraib.
Exactly. No. Absolutely. That's the thing. It's really weird to actually sit and think about the fact that, when you're watching Casino Royale, this is all being made in a world where we all have those images in our head of people being tortured by the U.S. Army, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have that same image in your head in 1960 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just there's been a certain like kind of grimness and the type of violence in the James Bond movies of, the 2000s. This movie may not be good, but boy, it's a lot more fun than, watching Daniel Craig be tortured.
It's a charming tune.
So that was, Octopussy. Starring Roger Moore, Maud Adams, Louis Jourdan, Christina Wayborn was Magda, Stephen Burkoff as Orlov, who is the general. And
He was great.
yeah, he was great. And you've got Desmond Llewellyn as Q, Robert Brown as M, Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. We didn't even get into any of that stuff. And Vijay Amritaj as Vijay.
Yeah.
The Indian asset.
Mm-hmm.
And directed by John Glenn with a screenplay from George MacDonald Fraser, Richard Mailbaum, Michael G. Wilson, and of course Ian Fleming is credited.
Yeah. You can feel all those writers at once.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a mess of a movie. And yet I get it. Like, I understand why people get into it. I think this one's too silly and doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's kind of racist at times, or at least culturally insensitive. But, yeah, I get it. So, you can follow us on social media. We are Mary vs. Movies on Twitter. We are Mary vs. Movies on Instagram. We are Mary vs. Movies at mas.to on Mastodon, and we are Mary versus the Movies on Tumblr, although I really gotta start using Tumblr. Let's see what else. We are working on a website. I know, I still gotta actually get it out there. Sorry. But that will be maryvsmovies.com. What else? You can write to us. We are maryvsmovies@gmail.com. Please write to us with any comments, questions, complaints, or suggestions. If you want to join our newsletter, you can sign up by emailing us at maryvsmovies@gmail.com once again. And we, of course, have a Patreon, which is Mary vs. Movies, where not only will you help support the show at $3 a month, you will also, starting January, which is now, once a month we will be releasing our secondary podcast, Hollywood Avalon, which is us looking at movies of an Arthurian bent. And our first film, not unrelated to this, is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is one of my favorite movies. It was a very formative movie for me, a very important movie for me, and I think it's a great way to kick off that particular podcast. So if you're into Arthurian movies, if you want to hear about stuff, everything from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade to Excalibur to what I assume is going to be terrible First Night to The Sword and the Stone. Like, we're going to be covering as many Arthurian type films as we can figure out. So that's going to be our secondary podcast, and you can get that by getting onto our Patreon. Next week. Now, originally we flipped a coin last week, and we were going between this and what was it? For Your Eyes Only?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you bringing up Never Say Never Again has made me think, you know what? I think our next movie is actually going to be Never Say Never Again, because I think that'll be interesting to contrast between this movie and that movie. You know, they came out the same year. There are two different production companies. We have Sean Connery coming back as Bond. I think that's going to be really interesting. So next week it is not going to be For Your Eyes Only. It's going to be Never Say Never Again. So I'm kind of excited for that. I'm kind of excited because, again, I did not grow up with James Bond, but in a way I did and didn't know it. So, Dennis.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Having problems keeping it up, Q?
Ew. Ew.